Welcome to the second chapter of Workspace, where it all comes together and it's going to get awesome. And in this particular chapter, we're going to talk about a bunch of dope stuff like general geometry. Where do you put your speakers for stereo, 5.1, 7.1, 11.1? We're going to show you all of that and some cool graphics as well. Then delay issues that we have with parallel walls. We're going to talk about speaker stands. We're going to talk about what kind of wattage your speakers have. We're going to talk about how you find the right speakers. We're going to show you how to tune your room, people. It's awesome with the 31 band EQ. I love that part. And last but not least, we're going to show you the most important gear you should buy as a filmmaker and in what order. Let's roll. Before we do anything with treating our room or anything like that, we got to figure out, one, where our butt's going to go in a seat, and then two, where the speakers are going to go. Nothing more important than be able to know that you've got the speakers in the right position, whether they're too high or too low, too far or too close. So let's start with stereo. Stereo is really easy. It's called the magic triangle. The magic triangle is, you can see here, each speaker and each listener, in this case, this lady, the dudette, is exactly the same distance from the speakers from themselves, the speaker to the listener. Everybody's the same. In this case, it's 6 feet. And that's, just a random number. Probably for you, it's going to be between 36 inches and 48 inches. And some of you are going to do your measure with your tape measure and go, well, if I'm 40 inches from my speaker, that means my speakers are really close. That doesn't seem right. I like them way out here. Yeah, well, that may sound great to you and have this big, wide panoramic spectrum. But here's the problem. It's the same thing with using Bose speakers versus nice flat ones. If you mix with speakers that are too wide and you pan something, you're going to go, oh, well, that's really, really way over there. I don't want to pan it that far. Let me make it more middly. Well, when you listen to it in somebody's system that is correctly positioned, everything's going to kind of sound mono. Conversely, if your speakers are too close together, you're going to want to go, oh, everything sounds mono. I want to really pan things. And then in a tuned studio or a tuned system, everything's going to seem like, wow, what happened here? So we want to have everything in that equilateral magic triangle, if you will, the triangle between speakers and you. Now, 5.1 is almost exactly the same as stereo, at least for left and right. You've got the left and right should still be in that equilateral triangle to the listener. What we're adding is the center channel. Now, the center channel should be equidistant from the left and right, just halfway, right? But also equidistant from the listener. Now, you're like, well, but wait a minute, I took geometry. That means that the center speaker is actually a little bit further back than the left and right. That's correct. It's not going to be in a straight line. You're not going to have left, center, right, straight. It's all in a big circle. And in this circle, you'll find the surround speakers are there. And as you can see, we pull back here. There's the dude on his couch. And you can see that center channel is slightly recessed as we pull up. Now, these rear surround speakers, those ghosted ones, those are what Dolby would suggest you do. I actually don't suggest you do that. You want to keep those surround speakers there in the back. Now, here's some angles for you. 30 degrees left and right, and then the center in the middle. And then those surround speakers, notice they're exactly opposite. They're actually pointed toward their respective opposites, left front, right front. So don't be confused about those angles. You're just really pointing them right at the left and right. And they're equidistant from the listener as well. So they're in their own little magic triangle from the rear. Also notice the subwoofer. The subwoofer is in that circle. So you'll notice the center speaker is slightly recessed. The subwoofer is slightly recessed. Now, it doesn't matter which side of the center speaker you put the subwoofer. In fact, you can put it in the back if you want, as long as it's equidistant from the listener. Be a little weird to hear all the bass coming from the back when the explosions are happening on the screen. But generally speaking, anywhere in that circle is fine. I like it in the front, but left and right, it doesn't really matter. So the reason for that is because super low sub bass frequencies go everywhere. And when you hit a boom from an explosion or a car door close, you want it generally from the front, but it doesn't matter which side. Now, 7.1 is identical to 5.1 with the exception that we're adding side fills. There's the dudette on the dude's couch with the G&E bottle there in the front. Those side fills, what they're doing is creating this beautiful ability to create phantom mono or phantom center anywhere you want, but they're directly 90 degrees opposite the front. You also want them to be equidistant. Again, everything equidistant. Notice with the side fills, it's impossible for you to have those Dolby recommended positions for the surround speakers. They have to be back there in that 150 degrees or opposite the left and right front positions. And indeed, sound is 80%, and you can see in 11.1, those speakers up there on the ceiling, they're in perfect square to each other at 45 degrees. Our 7.1 system is exactly the same, unchanged. So the two-dimensional aspect of it is 7.1. Then we look at the ceiling for left front height, right front height, left surround height, right surround height, my favorite mixing system. Those are just up there in a nice square. Now here's the thing, with 7.1 and 11.1, those mid speakers, what happens is if you've got two people or more on that sweet spot, the people actually block themselves from hearing them. So we want to slide those fill speakers a little bit forward, like 10 degrees at most, so that at least the people on the couch can get the benefit of the high frequencies. Again, from the ceiling, here's the position. Notice that the height speakers are slightly inset from the 7.1 position that's out there. So they're going to be a little bit inside. They're also going to be a little bit farther away because, depending on your ceiling, they're going to be higher up. And we're going to talk about what to do about that so that we don't create phase issues and all kinds of other things when we're doing an 11.1 mix. So where we put speakers is one of the most important things that we do. You would think it would be intuitive. You just drop them down wherever you want, and they should work. They're good speakers, but that isn't how they work. If you put them too high up or too low, you're going to have phase issues if you have multi-driver speakers between the tweeter and the woofer and all that. If you put them too narrow, you're going to pan things way too far. If they're too far, you're going to pan things too narrow. It really makes a difference. And we want to have our speakers in that magic triangle, both the front speakers and the surround speakers. I'm here with Josh, and we're going to demonstrate for you how I and many of us in Hollywood set our speakers. Now, it's kind of, old school, but sometimes old school is the best school. So the first thing we need to do is actually put the speakers correctly on the stands and any other ancillary stuff. We want all of these speakers to have the same uniform positioning on the stands themselves because, there is a difference between having this here and having it here. That's an inch, and that could create a huge amount of phase issues. So we want to make sure that all of these are correct. Now, your speakers and whatever you're putting underneath them and your stands, it's all going to vary, but we're just going to put this together and, however you need to do it, all the speakers need to be exactly the same. And we're going to give this a whirl. So it's important to find your listening position. And what we've done is put a tape measure. We've gaffer taped it to the top of that light stand there. And it's important to find that position not only in distance from your speakers, but height. You never work sitting back in your chair like this. So you want to actually find your position and lean forward. If you lean forward, I hope you don't, but find the position, put your hands on your mouse and then mark that. And how you mark it is you take a little piece of string with a little weight on it and you kind of plumb line it down and then you mark the floor. And then you put your light stand or whatever kind of stand you can tape your tape measure to. You'll see why we need that tape measure taped in just a second. You'll also see very quickly why you need to have a buddy. Otherwise, it's impossible to do this by yourself. Once you have that established, then if you're doing left or right, like stereo only, then it doesn't matter which speaker you start with. You can start with left or right. But if you're doing surround, you're going to start with the center. And what we're going to do is do with the center, but do this with your left and right just the same. So I'm going to grab this tape measure here. I'm going to pull this really nice and easily. Obviously, we have sandbagged. We beached the light stand. Now, this distance, this is your primary distance that creates your triangle dimensions. And the only part of this whole thing that's a little bit artistic or up to taste is what we're doing right now. The farther you put the speakers from you, the more the room is going to interact, because it means you have to turn up your speakers louder to get the same volume. But the closer you get to them, you're going to have more interaction between the speakers and more potential phasing issues. Now, these are gigantic speakers that need space. So I'm going to guess on your home studio, you're going to be between 36 inches and 50 inches. It depends on your situation and the size of your speakers. If you get below 36 inches, it starts getting really not so good. And then obviously when we're at right now 53 inches and higher, you better have a really good sounding room or really, really good speakers. So how do we measure? Well, again, from where that listening position is. And that listening position isn't where your eyes are. My eyes are way up here. It's back here. So that's several inches difference. So make up for that. Now, in the same way that you want to figure out where your listening position is, this being way, way different than this, you also want to know where the speaker position is. We don't want to ever measure from the woofer. It doesn't really make any sense. Although you have ideally perfectly well lateralized speakers and that they're all in the same plane, you will always want to measure where that tweeter is. And in this case, here on these JBL LSRs, it happens to be just about the position of this line on the speaker. But your speakers, you need to figure it out. It's never going to be out here on the edge, I hope. If it is, then it is. But find out, kind of do, you can, don't ever touch the dome, but, kind of do a little measurement. All right, it's about an index finger in. All right, it's about here. Okay, then you figure that out. We're at 53 inches. Now, my standard unit for error would be a 1/4 inch. A 1/4 inch isn't going to kill you. But for this purpose, we're slightly over 53 inches. So that's going to be our number. Stereo is a little bit different than surround in that even though we have 53 inches here and it's the center speaker, you still want to plumb this point because you still have to have a center point from which you can measure the other speakers. If you don't have a center point for stereo, your speakers may drift left and right to your desk. Some of the easiest ways to figure out, which side are you, too much left to left or right is just figure out the dimensions of your desk. Hopefully you're sitting in the middle of your desk and then measure the center. One way or another, you want to figure out where the center is between your two speakers. So in this case, if we're 53 inches out, half of 53, what's that, 26 and a half? Everybody says 26 and a half. I'm not the math guy. So 26 and a half inches that way would be your left speaker, and 26 and a half inches this way would be your right speaker. And then you're golden. The issue is everything is in a circle, right? This speaker, this speaker, this speaker, the surround, and the surrounds are all in equidistant to the listener in a circle. And what makes that difficult is you can't just say, I'm going to move a speaker over there because it'll be out of the circle. And then it can't be equidistant anymore this way. It might be this way, but not that way. So we found over the years, it's almost impossible to figure out how to make this work just with one guy and one tape measure. You're just never quite getting the angles right. So we're going to use in a second 2 tape measures. But for now, we know it's 26 and a half inches. So take this one and measure from that tweeter to this one. It'll go the other way. Yeah. 26 and a half. So you can see we're a little far. Now, we don't want to move the center speaker. That's our plumb line. We've plumbed this, so to speak, especially if you're in stereo. So we need this to be over here. So your middle has to say 26 and a half. Okay. So that's got to go over a little bit. It has to stay on the stand. You're going to pick up the whole stand and make it move. Yep, it's heavy. Remember what I said about upper body strength? You got to have it. Now, how does it look? Too short? Mm-hmm. Okay, split the difference. Try that. Mm-hmm. Pretty close? Yep. Now, he's got that pretty close, which is good, really good. Problem is, the chances of him having moved that correctly around the circle are almost nil. Because it doesn't have to be just 26 inches from this. It has to be 53 inches from the listening position to be in the circle. That's why we have 2 of these. So I'm going to hold this here. We're going to swing this around to 56 inches.
53.
sorry, 53 inches. Let me make sure I'm right here. Pretty close. So we're about a ½ inch short. This 53 needs to be right here on this 26. So you got to pull that. I'm going to hold both of these. You got to pull that speaker back just a ½ inch. The whole stand up, just there, I'm guessing. So we got this one done. Let's try the other one. Ooh, it's a nice dance. I'm going to put this right here in the middle. Fortunately, this has a little light. How are we doing on 26?
Pretty close.
Pretty close? All right. And then we're going to bring this over. We just happened to hit the jackpot for that. And then 53. Whoa. I think actually, see the 26 and a half, we might need to come, we're about a ½ inch away. So I think we need to move, this speaker needs to come my way just a little bit. So I'm going to hold both of these again. If I can. Should about it. Yeah, about it. Let's try this again. Put that back out there. Scoot it out. 53, 26. We're certainly within a quarter of an inch. Now, the acid test. Let's see if the left and right speakers are 53 inches. So we're going to pull this all the way over to here. What do you got? 50 inches. Not good. So what we've discovered is that these speakers don't actually line up. We couldn't get them to line up this way. We couldn't get them to line up that way. And we were just completely perplexed. What are we going to do? And then we realized that we forgot a very important step. And that is to pan the speakers directly to the center. See, check it out. If you've got this as a middle and you pan it over here, well now, even though the speaker may be in the right position, once you pan it, this middle section that you're supposed to be measuring from is wrong. Plus, we don't want our speakers not pointed at our listening position. So, silly me, went back and panned everything to the center where the listening position is, and it all matches up. We'll go to the other way. I'm going to hand this to you. Yeah? So what's the best way to pan a speaker? Well, you can use your eyeball pretty much, especially if it's this big. You can just look down it, take your tape measure and go, okay, it's in the middle. It may not look like the middle from you over there, but you go, all right, I'm pointed at the little thing there. Good. You can also take a laser pointer if you're really anal, stick it on there, put a piece of paper on there and just draw it like this has a little right angle, get it on a little right angle ruler looking thing and put it here, line it up, and you can point it and make it work. But, you know, your eyeball is going to do pretty good. So how do we do this? Bottom line, put the speakers on the stands uniformly. Find your listening position. Find the center or plumb it if you were doing left and right only. Then whatever that distance is, have it, not like have it, but put it in half. Then measure your left, measure your right, using the distance to the listening and the distance to the center channel, and you'll be able to get it. If you have any problems, it's probably because we didn't pan the speakers correctly. Make sure they're panned. Obviously, at the end of this whole process, you want to double check that they've been panned because you've been moving things around. But then you'll have everything equidistant, and the same thing for your surrounds. Have fun. Some of you are like, well, why do speakers have to be equidistant? Why does it matter that much? Well, the biggest reason is that imagine if you've got a 5-1 system, left, center, right, and you've got a speaker that's slightly closer. Well, first of all, that speaker you're going to hear louder than the rest because it's going to be closer, and then you're going to have to turn it down. But more importantly than that, anything that comes out of that speaker is going to hit you earlier. And even though you've turned it down, there's going to be an incident and a phase issue, especially if you're trying to do something in phantom mono. In other words, the same signal out of both left and right. If that right speaker is slightly closer to you, you're going to have phase issues and your mix is not going to be what you think it is. So we want all the speakers to be equidistant. Now, some of you are like, well, but I don't have a room that'll do that. I've got a really long room and my sides or I can't get the width of those speakers, or I have a really long or wide room rather, and I can't get the surrounds back far enough. I'm kind of cramped. Don't worry. Here's what we do about that. In Audition or in whatever digital audio workstation you're working on, you want to delay, and you can do this on your master output. You want to delay specific channels. So for example, let's say you have a very long, wide room. And that means that you can't get your surround speakers back very far. They're right up here, they're right up on top of you. You got nice distance from left, center, right, and sub, but your surrounds are too close. What you do is you find the distance of the longest speaker. How far is the farthest one? And then you find the distance of the shortest one. And let's say, I'm making up numbers now, but let's say your left, center, right are equidistant at 4 feet. And let's say your surround speakers are equidistant to each other and to you, but at 2 feet. What you need to do is delay the surround speakers by 2 feet so that they're virtually the same distance from your left, center, right. Well, how do we do that? Well, we know that sound travels at 1.1308 milliseconds per foot. So all you got to do if you want to move your surround speakers back 2 feet is multiply 1.1308 by 2 feet. And that is the delay number that you will put into your delay plugin that you're going to put on the master output and apply only to the left surround and right surround channels. Now, don't apply it to the long speakers because then you're just exacerbating the problem, right? Apply it to those surrounds and you'll have it. And you can apply this to your height speakers. And if you're an 11.1, you're going to do a lot of measuring anyway. So if the height speakers are really, really far away because you have a tall ceiling, which almost always happens, then you're going to be delaying the speakers that are on the floor, the 7.1 area, so that they all have the same, so that the sounds from the height speakers and the floor speakers are hitting you at the same time, 1.1308 milliseconds per foot. Do your multiplication, use a calculator, and everything will show up at your head incident. Now, if you're going to do this and you're going to apply delays on your master output, which is totally smart to do, remember, it's on your master output. And before you bounce your tracks out, you got to turn that plug-in off. Otherwise, your master will have those channels, those speakers, whatever, delayed, applied to your master mix. And someone else's system will have those speakers delayed too on accident, and it'll sound weird. So make sure any delays that you put in for your listening purposes, you turn off when you do your outputs. In the last section, we talked about reflections and how awful they are and how they ruin your ability to hear what's really coming out of your digital audio workstation. And that's absolutely true. But we also want to cover, just briefly, parallel walls in your architecture. Parallel walls they're breeding ground for bad reflections. And as you can see in this graphic, just sound coming out of speakers hits all kinds of floors and walls. And by the time it comes back to you, it's at all different kinds of delays, creating all different kinds of phase issues and frequency shifts. And there's just no really good way to live in a reflective environment and mix well. If we have parallel walls or ceilings or floors, which almost all of us do, because most of us don't live in an yurt or something like this, then we need to do something about that. The quickest and easiest way to do it, we talked about it back in the recording volume, which is do a wall flat. And if you've got a parallel wall behind you, or a reflective parallel wall, even worse, and your speakers hit you and then it comes back and then the reflections hit you in the back of the head, coloring your sound, you can just take a wall flat back there and then just move it 10 degrees so that it's at an angle. And then the sound comes, hits that back wall and goes somewhere else. You can put absorptive or diffusive material on that back wall, ideally absorptive. But wherever you're sending that other sound, that should have another patch or something that's absorptive or diffusive. It can be diffusive there too. Now, some of you are looking at me like, dude, wall flats are ugly. I hate those things. Well, don't worry. I know you've got your nice, designer decor. You can hang something from the ceilings that looks cool. You can have something on just be artistic about it. But whatever you want to do, you want to create a non-parallelism. You can actually put it on the wall if you want, make some art. Just make sure it's got a little angle to it. And then the side walls, the same thing. Wherever you have a mirror and you can see that there's a tweeter, and you're like, wow, I'm getting a primary reflection, put something cool on the wall there that either reflects it somewhere else, or you've got absorptive material or diffusive material on that. The ceilings, the same thing. And you create a really, really cool environment because, look, reflections are never going to work. And if you're not handy, like me, I'm always the least handy guy around, get some help. It doesn't have to be big construction, though. Just even something that's small can make a huge difference in that high mid-range frequency where phases tend to happen. If you're in a cubicle or something like this, and a small version of that, again, we want to avoid parallelism. You can just slide something in that creates this kind of motion or this kind of motion, or even what I would classify as oblique motion. So even the smallest changes to your parallel environment makes a big difference. And, the way houses and studios are built, there's just parallelisms everywhere. It's easy to create architecture that's square, but it's the worst thing for us in audio land. So if you get this handled, whether it's a giant wall flap behind you or on your walls, or you're doing something cool and artistic, you're going to be in better shape. Come talk to us on the blog and we will have some ideas for you. And if you're stuck, definitely talk to us and we'll do our best to get you through it. Now that you have your speakers in the right place, your butt in the right place, then we have to tune the room. And what I mean by tune the room isn't go in with frequency analyzers and craziness and all these other things. Look, hopefully you have good speakers, and we're going to talk about how to, put things on your room even more so that things sound better. Don't worry about that. Oh man, I got a little bump in some frequencies here and I got to fix that with a bass trap and all that. Don't worry about that. That's for sound designers. And if you're going to go that far, you should probably just hire a professional, really. Don't try to do it yourself. Unless you love that stuff. When I say tune the room, what I mean is run pink noise, not white noise, pink noise through your speakers. Now, you want to run it through one speaker at a time. If you run it through all the speakers, it just doesn't work. And in Audition, you do that by opening up the generate window. You'll see in that the tones and then be able to select pink noise, hit the play button. Now be careful because pink noise is unpleasant, not pleasant to listen to at all. And if you've got your volume up or you're not sure, you're going to get an earful or maybe end up wearing a speaker cone or something. So be careful, make sure your trims and volumes are everything down, bring everything up nice. Typically what you want to do is find whatever the dialogue norm that you're going to be working in. So for cinema, that means you're roughly minus 20 decibels. For DVD, Blu-ray, that means you're roughly minus 9, call it minus 12. And then for the internet, you want to have that up there really, really high, like minus 3. And this is what I'm talking about on your master outputs is what I'm talking about. So your peak noise is kind of hovering around there if it hovers, or if you've got an LED that'll keep it straight, then that's fine. Lock it there. Then, now that you have your pink noise going through your center channel, it's time to use a handy dandy little decibel meter like this. Simple little thing from Radio Shack. You can use your app in your phone if you want, but the problem with that is that microphone on your iPhone or your Android just isn't that good. You want something with a little bit better microphone. The readout part's going to be fine. It's just the input that's going to be messed up unless you get a nicer device. They make super expensive versions of this, but this one tends to work just fine. Radio Shack, $40. Go get yourself one. So, pink noise coming out of your center channel. You basically have 3 settings for it. Internet, television, DVD, cinema. Internet, tune your center channel to 75 decibels. Now, when you're doing that, make sure this is C weighted, not A weighted. If you've got a decibel meter that won't do C weighted, you got the wrong decibel meter. So C weighted, 75 decibels. And how you do that is you take this, got a little tripod looking screw on it, put it on a tripod right where your head is, not where your butt is, but where your head is going to be. And you got to take into account that you work like this most of the time. We don't work like this. Unless you do. Wherever that is, that's where your head that's where this is. Then adjust the volume on your speaker, however you're doing that, amplifier or speaker, so that this reads 75 decibels if you're doing internet. Then left, same thing. Turn the center speaker off, left only, 75 dB. Right, 75 dB. So that left, center, right all have the same 75 dB reading on this. Now your subwoofer, I'm not going to get into why this is. You need to tune it louder because basically subwoofers they do a lot of low frequencies. They need a lot more punch. They need more headroom. So what we do, we usually add 4 decibels to them. So for 75 dB, it's 79 dB. That's where you want your sub to be tuned. This should read 79 dB for your subwoofer. Now look, pink noise through a subwoofer basically makes this do this. Like this. It's kind of crazy. So you take an average to your eyeball from it. Now the surround speakers, we tune 3 dB less. Again, because in a theater or in your house, those surround speakers are either under the couch or way in the back of the theater. So we give them a little extra help, 3 dB more. So that means 72 dB for surround speakers. So let's recap. For the internet, left, center, right, 75. Subwoofer, 79. Surround speakers, 72. Now for DVD television, we tune this center speaker left, right to 80. Your subwoofer, 84. Your surround speaker, 77. Now for cinema, your center speaker, 85. Left, center, right, 85. Subwoofer, 80 or 90 decibels. And you're like, well, that's a little bit more. I know, go with it. And then surround speakers, 82. Now listen to me. I can't mix at 85 decibels as a dialogue norm for more than a few hours before I get totally tired. Totally tired. My ears just go. So, and I don't know how those guys do it for days and days on end. Don't you do it. Let me recommend. If you're going to do a cinema mix most of it at 80 decibels dialogue norm. Then when the director shows up and you're doing those last little tweezing niggly bits, tune your room back up to 85 and everybody will be excited and you'll save your hearing. 75, 80, 85 with one of these, one speaker at a time, and you're golden. Like I said, the most important part of your studio is positioning of your speakers and then their volumes, okay? If you tune or mix at the wrong volume, here's what happens. Let's say you're doing a cinema mix and you know that every cinema in North America has dialogue norm tuned to 85 decibels, but you mix at 75 decibels. That means because your brain is always lying to you, lower levels means your brain is less sensitive to high frequencies and low frequencies, which means you're going to turn those low frequencies up and high frequencies up unnecessarily because you're listening at a volume that's too low. Then when it gets to the cinema, it's like giant lows and giant high frequencies just going on all over the place, and people are like, it's too much of everything. Conversely, if you're mixing for the internet and you want to mix at a cinema level or louder, like a lot of people do, which is crazy to me, then you're going to have your brain hearing a lot more lows and a lot more highs, and you're going to tend to want to mix those down. And then when it comes to your internet playback, it's going to sound really mid-rangey and just, nasally sounding. So it's important, critically important, that you tune your room to the settings that you know the delivery is going to be tuned to. What you put your speakers on is almost as critical as the speakers themselves, what you're buying. There's a thing called acoustic coupling, and nothing to do with trains or anything like that. It just has the idea that when you put something that makes noise and actually connect it physically to something else, low frequencies and sometimes high frequencies are transferred to that other thing and no longer come out toward the audience or whoever the listener is, or other bad things happen. So we want to be really careful on what we're putting our speakers on. For example, if you put your speakers in a bookshelf, you got two problems. One, you've acoustically coupled your speakers to a nice piece of wood or worse, metal that's also very flexible and is going to accentuate weird bass frequencies. Secondly, you sent your speaker back into a hole where it's going to start sounding like this, or worse, it's going to start sounding like this, and you've got primary reflections happening off the bookshelves before it even gets to you. And it's really, really hard to treat that. So we want to put our speakers on things that are as resistant to this kind of phenomenon as possible. It's one of the reasons why we actually want to invest in speaker stands themselves. The better the stand, the better the situation, the better or the lesser this kind of acoustic coupling happens. Ideally, you want stands that are sand-filled or stands that have holes in them or hollow so you can put sand in it, which also kind of deadens the capability of the sound to go down and create that coupling effect. Anything that you can do to create multiple layers of different kinds of materials, whether you go from steel to wood to cloth, or cloth to wood to polymer, or anything else, every one of those different materials causes what's called a state change in the name of the wave, in the nature of the waveform, and that lessens the energy of the wave. Just like if you have two pane glass, for those of you who have double pane glass and unfortunate enough to live near an airport or some other noisy street, if you have two panes of glass, you have a space in between, and the audio comes from outside, hits one, is slowed down and also lessened in amplitude, goes through another space and hits another one that almost completely wipes it out. Also, and just as a fun example, in those windows, you don't want to have them parallel. You want to have one tweaked, which further, as you can imagine, sends the sound somewhere else. And whenever you bend a wave, it lessens its amplitude. So obviously, we don't want to put our speakers on glass. I'm just using it as an example. But having stands that limit acoustic coupling, and also the stand itself shouldn't be on hard floor. You should put it on something that is, again, changing the state of the waves, ideally rubber or cloth or something. Now, naturally, you don't want it to be something that shakes or anything like this. The best scenario is to suspend your speakers, hang them from the ceiling if you can, but that's not always possible. Your landlord may not like you screwing giant things into their joists in the ceiling or whatever. May not be good for your ceiling. If you do that, also consider this. Mid frequencies and low frequencies go up chain just like they go down stand. So you want to put rubber bits in between the wood that you're screwing it into in the ceiling or whatever that is up there, so that again you have less acoustic coupling. This is getting into studio design, but I'm just giving this to you for those of you who want to suspend your speakers. Be careful. The acoustic coupling is you're not avoiding acoustic coupling completely by just suspending them. One of the tricks that we learned at Soul 7 Studios, where I used to be the head engineer, is a really inexpensive way to pretty much eradicate acoustic coupling, even from really good stands. And I'll show you that in a second. Now, they actually make things, technical term again, for separating your speaker from your stand, if you must go with a stand. And this is an example. These are things from Auralex. And the idea is you put the speaker, and they come in pairs, right? Because ain't no speaker that narrow, or no speaker that you should be using anyway. And you just put this on here. It has a little angle already, so it kind of angles down if you want, or if you don't want that angle, you can take these little wedgy looking things and they go like this. These little things are called mopads, and they're pretty good. Where you notice the most change when you put one of these on, or one of those other kinds of things that you want to use, is in the bass frequencies. And what happens with bass frequencies is they just happily go down that stand, almost like it sucks the power of your speaker down the stand and into the floor, and you don't hear it. It's gone. So that body, that power that you're trying to put out through your speaker is just completely absorbed. And so what do? Well, you mix more low frequencies, or if you're using a 31 band EQ, you turn more of that up, and you're driving your speaker in a way that's really unnecessary, because the speaker's putting it out, it's just getting sucked down your stand. So these are reasonably priced, and they work pretty good. I've got another example of what we used at Soul 7 Studios in Hollywood, where I was the head mixer for years. A very, very inexpensive example. Let me show you what I'm talking about. And all of these speakers here at Hamill Brothers Studios are on these. Now, these really are a thing. There's no technical term for what this is. It's basically cement pavers, 2 of them, right? Pretty low tech. Weighs, I don't know, 15, 20 pounds. We put 2 of them together with gaffer tape, the good kind of gaffer tape. And what it does is it's a really, really solid piece of thing. And bass frequencies are literally thrust back up into the speaker that then gets sent out to you. I don't know how much this costs. It can't possibly cost more than $10. And if you do it with tape, everybody thinks that you meant to do that. Usually matches your speakers, matches your decor. It's also steadying. If you've got light speakers and a stand that's kind of a little wobbly, you put this on there, the sand will sink down into whatever you've got it on. Makes it much more steady. I promise you, if you do this, just try it with good speakers and see if you don't notice a powerful increase in bass frequencies that your speaker's already putting out and having it reflected back to you. In general, just be careful about acoustic coupling. Here's some really simple ways of solving it. There was a mockumentary called Spinal Tap that came out a few years ago. And one of the fun jokes that kind of changed musical culture is the idea that your amp goes to 11, right? Well, my amp goes to 10, a little knob, volume knob. Well, mine goes to 11. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's just a number on a knob. Well, but mine goes to 11. And the mine's bigger than yours, mine's louder than yours, comes to a screeching halt when we start talking about what actually matters, and that's wattage, the wattage of your speaker. So to give you kind of an idea, if you bought a car in the 90s and it had a stereo, something like that, chances are you've got 4 speakers in that car of yours, and each one of them is about powered by an amp that'll do about 4 watts, 4, maybe 5 watts or so. So you know how loud that little stereo of yours back when you were in those, well, if you were even alive there, how loud that was. And well, the problem with having that is, although it's loud, it was also really, really distorted, right? You could turn it up loud, but it was kind of like that, and it kind of had a really mid-rangey tone. Nowadays, if you buy like a Mazda 3 or something that's new, and I'm talking nowadays 2016, chances are you've got about 10 to 15 watts a channel. And you're like, well, that's still not very much. Yeah, but it's 5 times more than what they used to put in those. And that's plenty enough to hurt yourself, although there's still a lot of distortion in it. What we want for our studio monitors is at least minimum 30 watts per channel on the speaker. So that means if you've got a 2-way speaker, you've got 30 watts for the tweeter at minimum and 30 watts for that woofer if it's a little 5-incher, like on the LSRs, on the JBLs I'm talking about. What we really want is like 300 watts for the tweeter and 600 watts for that woofer. And you're like, well, that's going to be so loud. Like, I'll never turn it up that loud. It's not about volume. And this is what the point I want to make is. If you have speakers that are rated into the hundreds of watts and an amplifier that's built into their active architecture that can power them easily there, then you know when you're mixing at 85 decibels, your speakers are not going to distort at all. They're not going to distort if you have to crank up to 100 decibels. Distortion, and that's that frying egg crackling sound, even if it's subtle, destroys speakers super, super fast, but more importantly, causes hearing damage and takes your stamina and the exposure that you can take to loud volumes, the time limit of it takes it way, 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 way down. That's why if you go to a rock concert where there's a lot of distortion in the guitars, although the room's kind of masking a lot of that harshness, that's really hard on your ears. And it's also why if you go to an EDM concert, your ears aren't so damaged. I mean, depending on the volumes, because there's not a lot of distortion going on there that's actual real distortion where the speakers are having to come out and stop and come back. And that's what your ear balls are doing, right? Like this, and very hard on your ligaments and very hard on the whole system. So get speakers that have at least a 30-30 rating, ideally more than that, as high as you can. And that'll save your speakers and it'll save your earballs. So I recommend those JBLs, the LSR3s, but you need to go check for yourself. And how do we check for good speakers? Well, it's kind of a fun process, sort of like shopping for clothes if you like to do that, or shopping for cars or boats or whatever you want to like to shop for. Shopping for speakers, you just go to your local Guitar Center or Musician's Friend or whatever local retailer, and bring your iPhone with you, and bring a file on there, an audio track that you know. Now hear me. Don't play an MP3.
No way, Jose!
Don't do it. Turn your audio into something that's WAV or AIF or something that is at full bandwidth, even if it's coming from an original that's an MP3. Play it, convert it into that full bandwidth, little Indian, whatever, full bandwidth, 24-bit, 48K thing. Just trust me. And then plug in your little phone to your little jack to the speakers. Your salesman will help you. And then listen to a pair of them at a time. Listen to the events, listen to the KRKs, listen to the Tanois, listen to the JBLs, all of them. Go through as many as you can. Big ones you can't possibly afford, because that'll tell you what's out there. And then the cheapest ones, which you can't afford 80 of them. And then make a list. Write down the things that you like and what you don't like. Now, what you want to be listening for, however, is not, this one has a lot of bass, or this one has a lot of high frequencies. Look, if you want to find speakers that are actually flat, the manufacturers on any professional speaker will have given a little readout of its actual frequency response. And every speaker, even if it's the same kind of speaker from the same manufacturer, will have a slightly different manufacturer's or a frequency response from the manufacturer in quality control. So listen to the speakers, and here's what you're listening for. In the track that you've mixed, or the music or whatever audio material that you want to be listening, can you hear everything? Is everything in there that should be in there? Secondly, is everything in the right place panoramically? Now that obviously means that you've created sort of a pseudo magic triangle with the speakers in the place that you're in, and that's kind of hard to do sometimes. They're on a little table. If they're on a little teeny table, that means you got to get close to them, right? If they're on a giant table, that means you got to get far, which is never a good idea. Move them in on the far table. Get into that magic triangle and see if you can hear everything that you need to hear that should be there. Because if there are things you're like, I don't know if I hear the pianist's low notes anymore. I don't know if I hear the ambiences in this movie. I don't know if I hear the footsteps as well. Or, wow, I'm really hearing dialogue that's way too loud compared to what I understand. Or, wow, the music seems to be kind of enveloping in a way that's unusual, or it feels very, very mono. Those aren't the right speakers for you. I promise you, no matter what the salesman said, that's not right. If it doesn't sound right in the speakers that you're listening to, it's not right for you. Now, if you listen and you're like, I can hear everything, it sounds right, everything's in the right position, but there's a lot of high frequencies, don't worry about that. We can fix that with a 31-band EQ. We can fix it with a plugin on our master output. If you're like, there's a lot of lows in here, well, if it's not objectionable, again, we can fix that. But it's rare if you can find good, affordable speakers that give you that good position and that you can hear everything that you want to hear. The last thing to think about as you're listening is, do I get tired listening to them? When I'm listening, am I kind of squinting? It's a weird thing to check, but check your eyes. Are you going, this is hard to listen to? Not the right speakers for you. And I'll tell you that Genelecs, the old Genelecs, we used to mix, everybody used to love them. As an example, I'd mix on them and I'd be like this the whole mix. Wow, that's really hard to listen to. Great for doing dialogue editing, however, because all the little artifacts and noise show up. But for mixing, nobody wants to be like this the whole time they're mixing. So, position, can you hear everything? And are you squinting? If all that's good, in other words, you're not squinting, consider the price, consider if you can afford them. That's what maybe credit cards are for. Get them, install them, and let me know how you did. So what you want to do is start with a really good microphone. Ideally a microphone that is specifically suited for tuning rooms, but the good ones are really expensive. And what we have here is an NTG3. Perfectly good, not the best, but for this purpose, really good. You can also get a frequency plot of your NTG3 so that it shows you what it's going to do and what it isn't. It's on. Actually, they have them online at Rode. Anyway, any kind of microphone that's a condenser that is got a really good frequency response. What's also nice about this particular situation is that it's rejecting what's happening anywhere else in our studio. We're pointing it right at our speaker. We're also positioning this microphone right where the listener's head would be, right where their head would be, which kind of makes sense, right? So then you use a frequency analyzer, just like we have here. This is actually being run in Logic. You feed the microphone into the frequency analyzer, and everything that it hears gets shown up on the frequency analyzer. You can see in frequencies what's happening. Then last, but certainly not least, you want to patch the output of your digital audio workstation and your interface into the 31 band EQ, and then that goes out to your speaker or your speakers. Now, you can use cardioid microphones, although they're not that great because there's space between the microphone and the speaker. A hypercardioid is also not the best because it rejects some things that may be happening, like frequencies from other walls and things like that. An omnidirectional microphone is also not that great because, it's getting sounds from all over the place, which otherwise your body's not going to hear. Having a room tuning microphone is the best, but we'll go with an NTG3 and we'll see how we do. Then what you're going to send to the speaker is pink noise, not white noise, not a sine wave, and you do it on a generator. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here, this is just a little test tone generator. I've got pink noise engaged, none of these other bits here. And when we engage it, you can hear that pink noise comes through the speaker real good. And it shows up here on the analyzer. I'm just going to bring this down because that's hard to see. Then it comes through the speaker to the NTG3, and we use these bands to select which frequencies based on what we're seeing we need to turn up or down. Obviously, this is boosting, in this case, 31.5 hertz, and that's cutting it. This particular DBX231S has the ability to do 12 dB up, not just 6, which is how we want this to be. And most of these kind of devices also have an EQ bypass so that you can have the EQ working or the EQ not working. So you can see how your speaker was before you did any work, which is super nice. Generally speaking, I like cutting rather than boosting. When you boost in an analog device, and I'm not going to get into the theory of it, bad things tend to happen. The more you boost, the more noise you get, the more all kinds of other things that you get, whereas cutting takes less electronics to do, and obviously you're cutting noise, not boosting noise. So when we look at this in a moment, you're going to see all kinds of weird things happening. We want to take in our mind's eye the average of what we're seeing and cut the things that are too loud and boost the things if we need to, but start with cutting. But first, let's check out what this sounds like. So I'm going to play some pink noise. I'm going to put the EQ in. This is obviously our input meter. We'll start with it very low. And I'm just going to pull each one of these bands up so that you can kind of hear what these things, each one of these sounds like. It's going to sound really familiar, almost musical to you. Check it out. And we're going to bring this up. Now here's 100 hertz. 125, 60, 200, 250, 315, 400. For those of you that are musical, you're starting to hear that it sort of sounds like a minor arpeggio, doesn't it? It starts sort of, actually that was right there. It's sort of kind of doing that kind of thing. And if you know that every time hertz double, it's an octave. That's an octave. There's another one. Well, there's another one. Then you kind of get the idea that a 31 band EQ is octave with octave and octave and two little bits in between, which happen to sort of sound like a minor arpeggio. So if you're lost and you're like, I don't know what the next one's going to sound like, you'll kind of get the idea. It's somewhere on one of these notes or these notes, depending on which one of these you're using. So now let's take a look at what's happening up on the analyzer when we just play the pink noise. The first thing we need to do is put the pink noise at the correct level. And for this, we're just going to put it at about 75 decibels, as if we were going to do an internet mix. So I'm going to turn this on to about 70. And we're going to turn this down and turn up the pink noise. I'm going to hold this at the listening position, pointing it right at the speaker. That actually just so happens that straight up and down on this little knob is 75 dB. Good for us. Now, we've got that handled. We know we're at an internet volume for the right channel. Let's see what we can do as we look at the analyzer and play some pink noise. Now, I'm going to start at the top frequencies and come down. I'm going to turn this pink noise on and off just so you can hear, because I'm sure me talking over pink noise isn't that pleasant. Now, what I did there is I took the topmost band and I pulled it all the way up, pulled it down, pulled it all the way up, pushed it down, and you saw what happened on the analyzer. The top bands in any 31 band EQ are going to be the most difficult for any speaker to put out. Like 20 hertz, these are $1,500 speakers. They're excellent speakers, but I'm sorry, they're just not going to put out 20 hertz. It just ain't going to happen. And if you try to boost them to make it happen, you're just going to waste time because they're just not going to do it. So I will turn this down first of all, because we're just wasting bandwidth on a perfectly good speaker. For the high frequencies, we want to tune this highest knob to 20K. We want to tune that so that it's pretty much where a nice average might be, like where the lowest of the low show up over here and the highest of the high. Find an average, and that's where we're going to place this one. And then we'll just go down the rest. Check it out. And I'm going to say that's pretty good for now, and then we're just going to continue down from the right. Listen carefully. I will boost each frequency as I go so you can kind of hear what the frequency is that I'm boosting, but keep looking at the analyzer. Now we've got a pretty good level down to about 100 hertz or so. And it took me about, 2 minutes? Pretty quick. You might have some issues because you may have, like I said, at this point, you have issues that absorption and reflection and all that stuff hasn't been able to fix. But generally, this is like just an iron fist that goes up, too much frequencies there, kills it, and it's good. When we get to the low frequencies, it's a little more touchy because they kind of bounce and do kinds of weird things. So it takes a little bit more experimentation. But take a look at what this looks like right now. That's a pretty significant change from what we had, which was ultimately flat. So in fact, I'm just going to engage the EQ bypass so you can hear the difference. I'm going to put this on again. Now it's going to be a little louder because we did a lot of cutting. That's a pretty serious difference. Now, there's nothing wrong with the speaker. There's nothing wrong with the microphone, nothing like that. It's the room. And if you don't have some kind of a situation where you can have a perfect room that's perfectly tuned and all these kinds of things, you're going to have issues. And this is how we fix them. Let's fix up the lows and see if we can get out of this real quick here. Turn it back on again. And we're at 80 hertz or so. If you're not on headphones, you probably can't hear this. 40 hertz, there's no way. Now, here's the thing. We've cut a lot of frequencies, and I assure you we're no longer at 75 decibels. So once you get this to a nominal level, we turn the input back up so that we're back to 75 decibels, and we check again. Here we go. Looks like 125 is a little lacking. And we may need to help it with a little 100 hertz here. There we go. Also looks like around 300 is lacking. Wow. We might help it with a little 250. And it also looks like we've sort of got a slope, right? We have too much low frequencies, and the high frequencies all sort of need to come up a little bit, so we'll balance that. It looks like from about 500 hertz and up. Lastly, it looks like about 250 hertz is a little low. And 500. Now this, as compared to hitting the bypass button. I'm going to turn this volume down, because otherwise we'll blow ourselves away. So it's taken a little while, but now we've got a flat room, and it's super nice. And you can test this. Now, how do you test this? How do you know if you've got yourself a flat room? Well, it's the same way you know if you've got a good room no matter what you do. Mix something, take it somewhere else. If you've got a lot of low end, that means you don't have enough low end in your studio. If you have too much high end, that means you don't have enough high end in your speakers. So if you hear too much of something or not enough of something in someone else's studio or someone else's place, and by the way, listen to it in a lot of places because their room may also not be tuned, you flip it. Too much of something means not enough on your end, and then vice versa. So last thing, get a professional to do this for you. Get a professional to help come and just put some stuff in there for you, where the primary reflection thing should go, the absorption, the reflection, all that. If you can't afford it or you don't know anybody and we're not able to help you, as I think we can, but if we're just not able to give you enough help here on Cinema Sound, this is your answer. A couple $100, half an hour of your time, you've already got yourself an NTG3, right? And you got yourself a good sounding studio. So to tune your room right, you do that whole process to one of your speakers, the right speaker, the left, if you're doing surround, the center, and then do it to the other one. If you're stereo, the opposite, or one of the three, until you've done all of those speakers, and each one has a flat response. Obviously, you want to have a 31 band EQ for each channel. Then what you need to do is do all the speakers at once. If you're stereo, you're doing left and right. If you're surround, you're doing all the speakers. And you're like, well, what microphones do I use for that? Well, you have to have more than one NTG3. Ideally, you've got two of these. And what you do is you put them into an XY position, which we've talked about, where you put them together just about like this. Let me see if I can get this so it looks just about right to you, about here, so that the capsules are just on the other side. Also, that's what it looks like there. So they're at kind of a 90 degrees, but one's pointing at your right speaker and the other one at the left. Well, for you, one's at the right, with the left and the right. And then you have a little bit of space between them. You don't want them touching for obvious reasons. You put a little bit of space, and that's how you do it. Same with the surrounds. You're going to do it back there. If you're 5'1", well, good luck doing this. You're going to need quite a few of these microphones. Then what you do is you sum them. What does that mean? That means you take all of these inputs and you make them all mono. Now, if you're doing surround, you're going to want to do your front channels mono and the surround channels mono and do two different analyzers going. Maybe even do them at separate times if you want to. But for stereo, it's just take left and right, make them the same channel and run them to the analyzer. And you're going to find a little changes that you want to make to each one of those, the left channel and the right channel. You'll find that it won't be quite flat anymore. Now, when you get to this level, we're really Mickey Mousing this, just so you know. I mean, it's pretty Mickey Mouse. Again, use a professional. But if you have to and you want to, you can use these. I also recommend that you use, say, an XY microphone like on an H6 or an H5 or a Q8, anything that has a built-in XY microphone, as long as you know what its frequency curve is. Very few of those microphones are super flat. And if you can get from the manufacturer what the curves and the bumps are, then you can kind of plug that into what your curve should look like. And ideally, you want to make your room sound like, or at least on the graph, look like what the microphone curve looks like. Then you'll know it's flat. But you can do that in the front. You can do that in the back. You won't have to, and then you sum the same old way. But these, professional, XY, and you should be able to do it. So yesterday, the crew and I had an argument about the most important gear you could buy as a filmmaker. And they were talking about lenses, which is like obviously uber important, right? You got to have good glass or it's going to look like crap. But I also get the question, what is the most important audio gear I can buy? Now, you can have any opinion you want on it. If it's not my opinion, it's fine. You're just wrong. Here's my opinion on the matter. The first thing you got to buy is a great computer. Huh? You have to have a kick-ass computer, whether it's a desktop or a laptop. These days, 2016, computers are so fast. You could buy something from 2012 and probably be okay. But if you're going to spend the money on a good computer, because you're going to be editing in Premiere or DaVinci or Final Cut or something. You got to have a fast computer for that anyway. Might as well have a fast computer for audio. 2, get the best hard drives. False economy shows up a lot of places, but never more than in buying SD cards and hard drives. Don't buy cheap hard drives for your working media. Backup media, man, cheaper is better. Fine. You're not going to spin a lot of stuff on backup media. Just, save it and get rid of it. But for when you're running hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pieces of audio in a large mix and you're scrolling big time video, much less if you're doing actual video editing or multicam, for goodness sake, you're going to need some really, really fast, dope hard drives. My strong suggestion is buy racks of RAIDs. A RAID, R-A-I-D, redundant array of independent disks. You want that going for you. RAID 0, super fast, no backup, no redundancy. You're gonna have to back that whole thing up all the time. RAID 1, really, really great, but kind of slow comparatively to a RAID 0, but still faster than the little independent drives, okay? RAID 5, kind of a nice combination of both. You've got some backup, you've got some redundancy there, and it's super, super fast. You get a little penalized when you have to write to them, but we don't care about writing because we're not gonna do a lot of writing, we're gonna do a lot of reading. In a mix, we're reading. When we're doing an edit, we're reading video files, reading. We're very rarely doing writing, so we can take the penalty for RAID 5. My suggestion, if you have to, buy lots of drives, independent drives, and build them as you get the money, 3 terabyte, 4 terabyte, whatever that is, and build RAID 5s, which requires you to have a minimum of 3 independent drives, get whatever software you need to do it on PC or Mac. You don't need a hardware RAID controller, although that's better, but you don't need it. There's a program called SoftRAID. It's a little bit of money, but it's worth it. Just create those RAIDs with your independent drives and then back them up all the time. Get good drives. Did I mention get good drives? So computers, drives, you got to have those to do filmmaking anyway. And then speakers. Speakers are like tires on your car. You wouldn't put cheap tires on your car and then go drift racing, right? That's suicide. You would put the best possible tires on your car that you could for your safety and for performance. It's the same thing with hard drives. It's the same thing with speakers. Get the best speakers that you can afford. Now, sometimes you can get inexpensive speakers that are just perfect for your situation, like those JBLs I mentioned earlier, the LSR3s. Or you can go to a level like these and spend $1,500 a channel and get the top, but you're going to be paying them off for a while if you're an independent. On the other hand, you're going to have an awesome reference and possibly, if you tune your room right, turn it into a rental as a studio for other people to use and mix in. So maybe you make your money back if you're an entrepreneur at all. But your speakers, if you're going to spend the money in audio, start there. Now, I've recommended speakers as your third thing, but if you're just wanting to do audio recording, obviously speakers aren't that important to you, in which case your next thing after speakers is an audio interface. You got to have great analog to digital converters, digital to analog converters, and some way to create a volume knob for your speakers. Having a software volume knob just doesn't work, especially when the software goes berserk and you've got this giant whee going through your speakers and you have no way to turn it down. It's really, really awful. And your neighbors call the cops and bad things happen. So if you've got an interface like the Motu Mark III or anything from Roland, it's got a little volume knob on it. It turns all speakers down, not only in stereo, but in surround if you're running those discrete outputs. So it's super important. But most important is those good analog to digital converters and digital to analog converters. You're going to expect to spend $400 or more. Now, if you're looking to spend $5,000, that's just overkill. You don't need that unless you're doing like super pro, like lots of channels and, lots of inputs and outputs. I mean, if that's, you're doing something special and you're building an actual studio, good for you. But for filmmaking and you're just doing it out of your home or somewhere that's a little less than a super pro studio, $300 to $500, maybe $1,000, that's probably a good value for you. You've got a computer. You've got your drives, you've got speakers, you've got audio interface. Now, time to buy some microphones. And, you're not going to find a better value than Rode microphones. I'm just sorry, you're not. There's great microphones out there. And if you want to spend a lot more money on them, be my guest. Great stuff out there. But bang for the buck, you want to buy your Rode microphones, my strong suggestion. So that includes if you're doing sound recording on set, you've got your ultracardioids, your hypercardioid shotguns, lavaliers, transmitters, receivers, and all of that. And then if you're on studio, you need your voiceover mics, you need your, also hypercardioids for doing ADR and those kinds of things. So you got your computer, you got your hard drives. Now to get any computer to run, you have to have software and you have to have your digital audio workstation, but you're gonna have your Adobe package anyway, right? Because you've got Premiere or you've got Photoshop, then you've got Audition built in. Doesn't cost you anything else. Now, if you want to deviate from Audition, you can do that. You've got Logic, you've got Pro Tools, you've got, if you're on a PC, then you've got, Saw Studio, you've got Cubase, all those things. But don't spare any expense for software. It doesn't really matter if you're an Adobe person already because you get Audition for free, but don't be like, oh, well, I really only want to spend $100. I'm going to go get GarageBand or some nonsense thing like this. That's just the worst false economy. So software is really, really important because that's basically the car you're going to be driving. Get yourself a nice one. All right, so now we've got a working studio. We've got the computer, the drives, the speaker, the microphones. We've got software. We've got all of it. And now we're in a room that may sound awful and your mixes aren't going to translate. So now is when we want to start buying some hardware, maybe buying some RLX or buying some other kind of reflection or treatment or special carpet or things for the table, whatever you want to do so that your room doesn't have sound banging all over the place in there. Maybe a 31 band EQ you need to buy or whatever that is. This is the time to spend money on that. And then the last thing to consider is what I would call producible materials, things that make your studio look cool and ideally help you mix. And that would be what I would call control surfaces or fader packs or something like this, where you have something that's on your desk that sort of looks like a mixer, but all it really does is control your digital audio workstation to do faders or shuttle or jog, sort of like those DaVinci consoles that we've had for years and years and years that look super cool, right? Well, there are fader packs that work with that. And Fairlight has them. But then if you want, you can do what I have here, which is get the Raven, an MTI2, where you don't need any fader packs. It's all multi-touch and it works super great. And you can just drag the faders with your fingers. Super nice. Now, I want you to notice that nowhere in here have I said anything about mixers themselves, actually needing a mixer. Now, if you're an editor already, the chances are you've already got some small little speakers and a little mixer from Mackie or Behringer or something like this so that you can run a lot of different signals in and make that, kind of blend them together to come out your speakers. And that's fine. You should probably keep that. It's probably nice and it's sitting there. But what I'm talking about is having all of that integrated into your software, into your digital audio workstation, which is another reason to work in a DAW rather than an NLE. Because when you have an audio interface, it acts like a virtual mixer and all of your cables are going to go in and out of that. So if you've got a little mixer already, don't worry, that's great. If you're in stereo, you can use it as your own little volume knob. You don't have to buy an interface that has a volume knob on it. It won't work for 5.1, unfortunately. So but for stereo, it'll work great. If you're doing 5.1, you're still going to need that volume knob on your interface because I don't actually know of a small, inexpensive mixer or even a medium price mixer that'll allow you to have a global volume knob for a 5.1 or 7.1 system. So this is the end of the workspace volume. And some of you may be feeling like, well, why does this matter for independent filmmaking and audio? Well, in my opinion, having the most accurate workspace so that it accurately represents what it is that you're listening to is the most important thing to have in your post-production process. And if you only walk away with one thing from all of this, primary reflections and parallelisms and all this stuff, walk away with this. Your equipment doesn't matter. Because you can have a broken pair of 1957 Altec speakers that the coils have been long since dried up and a broken down tube amplifier with the knobs all burned off. But if you know what it sounds like and you're in a well-tuned environment, you're going to be able to make mixes that sound just as good on anybody's system as it does on yours. Better, of course, because they'll have better speakers, but at least it'll be what you expect. Conversely, you can have a pair of these speakers, in my opinion, the best speakers in the world for doing mixing in the near-field way. But if you're in a reverberous room with parallel ceilings and walls and, a hard glass desk that's showing you all kinds of wrong frequencies, your mix ain't ever going to measure up. And it's always going to sound wrong no matter where it goes. So having a well-tuned workspace is critical. Don't be afraid to go back and review this chapter in particular, and email us or contact us on cinemasound.com on the blog and ask us more questions, and we'll do our best to have you sitting and listening in a great workspace, regardless of what it is you have. We'll see you then.